Nur Hidayah Muhammad Akil of Meranti, David I of the London School of Economics and Political Science, and Manisa Saruji of BrainGeeks Inc. examine research to market fit strategies that can better close the research commercialization divide between academia and industry.
Okay, hi, good evening, everybody. So today we're going to have another session where we're going to talk about research to market and also strategies to close the commercialization. So the first question I will ask David regarding when we talk about commercialization and also research to the market fit. What do you think about technology's readiness level and how the technology's readiness levels can contribute to the market readiness level?
Sure, thank you very much. In general, technology readiness can be assessed rather objectively, and there has been a very well-established practice, guidelines, and almost industry standards. However, when it comes to market readiness, there isn't any well-established set of standards. In fact, every single market segment really is so unique and so different. It's often very, very challenging to say that you know exactly whether the market is ready or not without going to test it. So my proposition is actually a little bit different, that yes, it's extremely important to look at the market readiness because by the technology alone, it will not be adopted by the market if the market is not ready. However, to assess the market readiness, for sure, it's often very important for you to literally go to the market and test it. Don't sit in your lab and try to come up with all kinds of surveys or a hypothesis and convincing yourself that the market must be ready for it. Go out there and find your customers, talk to them, and test your prototype. That's just about the only way that we know how to establish the market readiness function or factor very effectively.
Okay, so when we talk about all these things in terms of market readiness and technology readiness, usually university going to promote their technology via what we call tech profile. So Manisa, what do you think about that tech profile? What is the most item that we need to emphasize in the tech profile itself? Because as we know, when we talk about tech profile, is a medium can be used to make sure that SME especially can take out the technology from university.
Well, I think at the end of the day, when we're talking about communication, about the research that or IP that we're trying to commercialize, it must be in a way that makes sense to our target. So the first thing that we need to do is know who you're talking to, know which particular industry or parts of the industry that you're tackling. So for example, like if let's say your research is a sensor, right? A sensor can work differently for retail. It can work differently for manufacturing. So by knowing who you're targeting specifically, then the way that you write in your tech profile will be in a way that would matter to them, in a way that they would understand. And what does that mean? That means you need to be able to trigger the emotional connection with what you're trying to convey in terms of especially the application of the technology. So you need to be able to appreciate what they would consider as a gain and what they would consider as a pain. Now, if you start writing down this long list of benefits, but at the end of the day, they don't relate at all to what the target market considers as a pain or gain, then it definitely they're not going to get you. They're not going to understand you. And I think the other issue that a lot of research commercializers face is really the balance between explaining the technology and explaining the business aspect of the IP. And it's really, really important that they strike that balance. Too much technology when you're talking to business means they're not going to get you. Too much business and no technology, they're not going to see which part of this is really research. So I'd say it's a combination of all those things that needs to go into that one page technology profile that you're presenting to business.
Means that the language is very important. We don't need to
Very,
be
very, yes.
okay. Don't use all the jargons words. Have to make sure that markets can capture what the things that you need.
Well, I don't know. I think it's about balance as well, because no jargons at all, people will think that this is not from university. But too
Okay,
much
I
jargon,
understand.
people don't understand. So it's really about having a balance between the technical stuff and the business stuff, so that at the end of the day, the objective of making sure that industry gets what you're trying to sell to them, and they're able to imagine how the technology could apply to their business. That is the most important. So you got to understand them, they got to understand you.
Okay, I understand. Thank you, Vanessa. So, David, when we talk about when we want to promote our technology to the SMEs, especially, do you think what is the best medium that we need, that we can use? Is it a licensing or spin-off from the or university create their own spin-off company?
Actually, the answer really depends. It really depends on the type of industry structure and also the market readiness, as you described earlier. Because sometimes in certain industries, for example, in pharmaceutical industry, a lot of university-based research will be focusing on very specific things that the industry is dying to solve. And as soon as you publish a paper, your phone will just ring off the hook, and people, you don't even need to quote unquote promote anything to them. They are really ready. So in that situation, there's no need to do a startup. In fact, if you do a startup, it will slow things down because the startup process will take a long time. And you have ready and available, willing licensees. So just sit down, negotiate a licensing contract, either exclusively with one or non-exclusively with many of them. That's great. But sometimes you just don't have anybody ready, able, and willing to take over your technology. One very good example is a little known fact of Google. When Larry Page finished his PhD research, and my former colleague at Stanford, went with him to visit all the search engine companies at the time. Nobody wanted a license. Nobody, not one company gave him an offer. So what do? You have to do your startup. There's really no choice. So sometimes it's not necessarily a question that can be answered immediately sitting where we are now. But it is something that needs to be explored.
Okay, I understand. So when we talk about all this situation with the spin-off, or maybe we can license it to other parties. So when do you think is the best suitable stage for us to promote our technology to the market? Maybe Manisa or David can answer the question.
It really depends. Because I think if we go back to the earlier point that we both made about the importance of actually understanding your customers, right? So I would say it really depends on the readiness on the customer side. If let's say, for example, I think David just now mentioned that there would be some technology where when it comes out, you don't really have to like call people, you don't really have to like market to them. They're like waiting for it. They're waiting for the solution. So once it's out, your phone won't stop ringing. And then of course you've got the ones where people are not aware about them, they're not ready for them, right? So when you talk about the I guess the suitable stage for promotion, um it really depends, but my point of view is that there are benefits of actually communicating about what you're researching on early, because what that means is that you're able to test and validate the need for your research. Because I think a major pain point for a lot of universities is that high redundancy. That you spend a lot of time, you spend so many years researching to something, and suddenly when it's out, suddenly like nobody is giving cares about it, or feels that they need to invest in it. So you really don't want that. So that is one level of communication to validate the idea. But of course, at that stage, maybe you don't want to reveal too much. You just want to confirm the issues. So then at a later stage, when you've developed the idea a bit more, um, maybe even before you register for IP, that would be another stage where you may want to try to get an early adopter, somebody to test it out. Because with early adoption, what that means is that you can actually be sure that if I spend all this money on IP application, registration, and valuation, that I know that at least I have an early adopter that represents the masses of target that comes from that particular profile of customer, right?
Okay.
And then after, of course, after the registration, everybody knows you go all out and push out the idea. Sorry, the technology. Yep.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. David, your view on this?
Yeah, very similar to Manisha's view, but I would also add that it's very common, probably one of the most common feedback or complaint that we hear sitting in the university technology transfer office is that, oh, well, this technology is just not ready. It's not proven. So you just wasted a lot of my time. And therefore, I think sometimes you have to bear in mind that at the very least, proof of concept is very important. And also you need to have the data to back it up.
Right.
So it's not just an inventor's wild dream. That is something very, very difficult to work with your business partner. You have to have something that's proven at the very least. And the other thing is also to Manisha's point that it depends on the licensing or the commercialization partner. Some of them are very sophisticated, and they, in fact, may even prefer to pick up the technology at an earlier stage so they could add their own contribution to build even stronger defensive mechanism from IP protection standpoint.
And I think
But
like in Malaysia,
not everybody is that way.
but David, like in Malaysia, if you chase your wild dreams and only you dream of it, there's a term that we have here which is called shot sendiri, which means only you feel that it's
Yeah.
unique and awesome, and nobody else does.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so Marisa, I think because we can see that a lot of things happen in the middle. So do you have any tips that you want to give to the TTOs or RMC or ICC, especially for them, in order how to make sure that they can market the university technology, especially to the spin-off and also to SMEs? Do you have any tips for them?
Sure. I think one fact that a lot of people need to realize is that the decision makers on the industry side, they're getting younger and younger. If you look at decision makers who are from Gen X and from baby boomer and above, they tend to prefer the one-to-one connection, the long process of pitching and explanation and all that. But when you look at the younger decision makers, they prefer to have other modes of discovering or learning about the technology. And this is where you can actually use tools to actually understand them. For example, like if you use tools like Data Voyager, you can actually use that to do profiling of the decision makers and to look at certain information like the type of videos or visuals that they would consume, media that they would use, so that when you want to look at putting together the information to communicate about your research, you know that these kind of mediums are mediums that they will use. And then if you look at other modes, like for example like Fusion QB, they provide mobile first solutions. So what that means is that you do not need to build a website separate from a mobile app. You can actually because universities, when it comes to open innovation, you like to showcase your solutions, right? So when you build something mobile first, what that means is that you're catering for the preference of the younger decision makers to use mobile phones instead of being at their laptop and looking at just websites. And then when you look at B2B, and B2C type of decision makers, their considerations are different. Some still requires events, and this is where you may want to use tools like Evenisis that allows you to showcase your all the solutions that is coming up from the university in an event environment, virtually and also hybrid. You've got tools like Asia Tech that provides metaverse. What it allows you to do is interact and engage with the decision makers in a different kind of environment. I don't know whether David does these kind of things, but universities can actually use metaverse as a way to get people to immerse and engage in an environment where they can actually be presented with the research idea in more, I guess, scientific environment in the metaverse. And then, of course, if you talk about influencers, now there are lots of options. You don't have to just use celebrities for B2C type of products. I think university does have, say, for example, like ingredients for food and beverage and all that. You can use tools like SushiVid to actually get access to all sorts of influencers. Even for B2B, you also have influencers for B2B as well. So for university now, when it comes to how you do your marketing, like I said, understand your customers, who they are, their preference, and then look at how they can be reached, the tools that they use, the preference that they have, so that when it comes to promoting not just the technology, but also the kind of research that's going on in your university, you have all these marketing technology tools that you can use.
Okay, thank you very much, Marisa. So, David, before we end our session today, do you have any tips for the TTOs and also RMC?
Yeah, I think that in order to make the process a successful one and a rewarding one for everybody, it's important to remember that we're not just pushing one transaction at a time. We're really trying to build the bridge, and we're trying to build the structure. We're trying to build the process. The most successful projects always involve all the parties. So hopefully the inventors will not feel that, oh, I'm the inventor. You guys are the marketeers. You are the business development people. You deal with it. I don't have time for it. And the TTO or the tech transfer office personnel would remember to respect the inventors and also involve them in all kinds of capacities. Sometimes it takes more than one try. Sometimes it takes a consultancy project at the beginning or during the system integration and testing period. You need to get the original inventor involved so to make the whole process a success. So it is a joint project. And remember, don't focus on single transaction, focus on the entire picture. Because once you build up the process and structure successfully, there will be more and more innovations coming through this engine. So it's important to keep track of that. Don't try to win everything at every single transaction. Try to promote the benefits of the entire ecosystem. That's it.
Okay, sure. Thank you. Thank you very much to both of our panels, David and also Marisa. So as a conclusion for our discussion today, what I can say is when we talk about technology and also marketing, the most important element is the language that we need to use in order for both parties to understand. And also the most important thing is we need to make sure that what is the best way to make sure that our product can be commercialized. So I think that's for now for our session today. Thank you very much for all participants, and thank you very much to both of our panel today.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Ideas. They're more than just ideas. They are a testament to originality and resourcefulness. Malaysia has shown, time and again, how ideas transition into greatness. So, what if all ideas had a shot at standing tall among the best? Great ideas aren't always perfect. Disruptive ideas rock the status quo. Big ideas are often belittled. Creative ideas are often scorned. But no matter where ideas come from, whether labs, classrooms, or mountaintops, or even our struggles and motivations, these inspired visions deserve everything it takes to accelerate change with the new return on ideas. Because every masterpiece has to start somewhere and needs room to grow. So now is the time for the seeds of ideas to mature and strengthen and highlight the value of Malaysian ingenuity as we reach for new heights together as a nation and forge the return on ideas. To all fellow innovators and game changers, we are here for you. Ideas to impact. Meranti.
Hi everyone.
Hello, Manisa,
Hi
Hidayat,
Joanne.
David.
Hi David. You want to switch on your camera? I think we've got a
Also,
few
David is
academicians, academicians in the room. I know there's Prof Ida. Prof Ida is in the room.
right.
Or has Prof Ida left the room? Do we have any academicians here who wants to join the stage and have a chat with David? You can switch on. Sorry, you can raise your hand, and then we'll bring you on stage. Raise your hand using Emit so that you can come on stage.
Mhm.
What time is it over there, David? I think it's very early, right?
Yes, it's 7 in the morning in
Hmm,
Venice, Italy.
nice. Apa tu? Daya, do you want to switch on your camera? Yeah, I think we had some very interesting conversations going on in the chat with regards to, I think one that came up was on the type of conversations that the innovators and inventors from university has with industry. That I think is a chicken and duck conversation, a direct translation of uh, what we always use as reference for both sides, saying different things. Um, and I think we've kind of like addressed that during the session. I think Daya's questions was very good in that sense, because it covered that part about the language to be used, right? And then there was a question of who is to be the tech translator. We had Nur Farini Dain who asked that question, and she talked about the KPIs and agendas that can sometimes be different between both parties. David, maybe you can share your thoughts about that, about the KPIs and agendas of university versus industry.
Sure,
We've come
sure.
across so far.
Yeah, I think that understandably, they have very different objectives and KPIs. Most of the researchers are really working on, on publications naturally, and on advancing their academic career. They are not necessarily workers for the industry, and they don't get any extra points. A lot of times, sometimes they do, but most of the universities will not give researchers any credit if they put together a product for on behalf of an industry player. So the industry players will need to understand that it's just a different ball game, a different set of KPIs. It's not to say that these two parties cannot communicate, but they
Yeah.
need to understand where each other is coming from and try to find a place to meet in between. And sometimes it is a way, for example, some governments have set up uh, stop the gap funding mechanism, or
Yeah.
sometimes a proof of concept funding mechanism. Those are all very good attempts. And some universities have even gone so far as to provide incentives, meaning KPIs, to allow faculty members to get the credit and recognition when they work more closely with the industry. But that doesn't work for every single university. Most of the universities are still focusing on academic knowledge advancement, which is what they are supposed to do. So
Yeah.
some universities may be able to take care of certain industry needs, but I think that the starting point is for both sides to really understand where each other is coming from.
Mm. Um, and I think when it comes to when it comes to KPIs, from the industry perspective, it does get a bit complex because uh, that requires university to understand not just the KPI based on the revenue increase that they want, but also what is their strategy moving forward? What's their business strategy? David, like let's see how do you guys do that? How do you try to understand industry in the first place?
Well, I mean, obviously, it starts with communication, and we won't understand the industry until we start talking to people. Some reading will help, of course, but every single company has their own unique position and
Mm.
their unique challenges. And
Yeah.
you don't get that by just reading papers or reading industry analyst
Yeah.
reports.
Yeah.
And you do need to sit down and try to communicate with the company. And you will find
Mm.
amazing things when you open up and really try to understand. So what is your biggest challenge? Um,
Right.
and what are you really looking for? And where do you think that we could collaborate? Those are
Yeah.
all very relevant questions.
And but usually I will ask the researcher
Mm.
to,
Mm.
because the researcher actually they like to disclose everything, especially in terms of the brain of the technology. Sometimes, so usually I will ask them to, okay, why don't you just I will guide them. What is the best thing that they can talk with the industries? Because yes, the brain is with the researcher, but when industry got the brain, I would say they know how to do it because basically
Yeah.
they have the hands-on activity on their side. So for the win-win situation, because of course the technology or the idea is
Mm.
from university, of course we
Yeah.
want to give some credit to for the researchers. So that's why we really boost for we really promote, so the one of the way to commercialize the product is through licensing, where
Yeah.
we can work with the both parties, especially universities, researchers, and also industry, because at the end of the day, the researcher need industry to make sure that they can commercialize the product, and
Yeah.
sometimes the industry also needs some inputs from the university because there is not the expert. The expert is at university. So how we can have a win-win situation is through licensing. So in order for us to get that understanding, basically, that's why we need to have, like what David said, we need to have the
Mm.
communication. And
Mm.
usually for the communication side, usually at university side, they will communicate it by TTO,
So TTO will filter some of the information, what can be disclosed, what can't be disclosed, because as I mentioned earlier, researchers tend to tell everything. So that's why sometimes we need to ask them to hold for some inputs to make sure that whatever that they share
Yeah.
is not basically in terms of technicalities, but
I
more
guess it depends on the stage of the commercialization, right? Because like for example, like when you haven't registered for IP, maybe you don't really want to review everything, but at the same time, you still want to get some level of input. You wouldn't want to kind of like review everything at a stage where somebody else can come in and take parts of what you're looking at. And that's, I think, is a real concern that researchers have if they review too early. um I but when just going back to the question on KPIs, like in Malaysia, I think they use a Myra point system where you are given different points for different stages of or different things that you do. So if you're a consultant, you get a certain point. If you actually sign a commercialization agreement, you have a certain point, and there is actually more weightage when you commercialize, when you actually take your research out to market. How is the KPI system like for inventors in LSE? Is it similar?
No, it's different. I think that in most of the universities I have been with, um, they don't really have explicit KPIs because the concern is always that KPIs are usually uh, quite easy to be manipulated. For example, people could claim that, oh, I'm consulting for this company, but the company is owned by my cousin. Um, and or I'm really building a product, and the product is very almost like an existing product without very much innovation involved. And usually people in the department, people like your department chair, um, they have some idea about your actual contribution. And most of the universities I've been with actually rely on that kind of a more subjective um, kind of a measurement and nothing like explicit KPIs
Mm,
when it comes to this level of
yeah,
knowledge exchange indicator.
yeah. So in terms of I guess the extent of things or what controls the behavior of the inventors, how does LSE how does LSE kind of like ensures that there's a certain outcome that you get from the research activities? How do
I'm
you
sorry.
make sure? Because obviously LSE has certain KPIs, right, for research and commercialization. And I'm sure you have a certain target that you want to achieve. So how do you manage that? How do you ensure that all faculty researchers are moving towards that research? Yeah, KPI.
Sure. I think that in again in most of the universities, um, the assessment on faculty performance is a very tricky issue, and most of them actually depend on more like a peer review process.
Mm,
So
mm,
it's not anything that you could really put down on paper and saying that you get 1 point here, 2 points there, but
mm,
rather it is a more of an impression kind of a situation. Now I
mm.
understand there are a lot of criticisms against such a very unclear set of metrics. So
Yeah.
there has been some desire to somehow incorporate knowledge exchange indicators into the assessment process, but it's not moving very quickly, and usually it requires the university senate, meaning the senior faculty members, to
Mm,
all approve. In the case of like LSE and a couple of other universities, it would involve faculty union and the union members, and then we need to negotiate with union representatives. So it's not a
Okay.
process that's
Got
likely
it.
to change very quickly.
Got it. Got it. Okay. I think we've got Professor Ida, Professor Ida from IIUM in the call. Sorry, can the host unpin David? Yeah.
Hi.
Hi, Professor.
Hi. It's nice to be involved in discussion. As you can see, I'm very involved.
Yeah. 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 So, what would you like to ask David since we have him on stage today with us? Go ahead.
Um, it's interesting to listen to what I mentioned in relation to KPI because Malaysia is crazy about KPI, and the imposition of KPI sometimes is not internally, but it's because of external pressures, from the ministry. The ministry themselves set the annual KPI,
Hmm.
not necessarily KPI, annual KPI, but KPI for promotion, and that somehow then is cascaded into annual KPI. So in most all universities that we know in Malaysia, KPI is very much the practice. And when I compare myself with my colleagues in Europe, in UK, LSE one of it, right? They are very relaxed when it comes to KPI.
Yeah.
The number of work that
Hmm.
they would appreciate or accept for promotion purposes is also very subjective. It depends on the quality of the work rather than the numbers of the work.
Right.
That gives a lot of academic freedom for academics to move because of the need to meet the annual KPI. Many researchers are not willing to work through their research finding and commercializing in the market because it takes a
Mm.
long time to bring your product into the market. It may take,
Right.
even if it take 5 years, that will take the time that you need to produce your annual KPI, and you have to move from one article to another, one research project to another, because the annual KPIs means the number of research projects that you
Right.
manage to obtain as well as completed within that year. So it's really really crazy.
Yeah.
And if you want to really do commercialize properly, you need to stay through your effort until your research products are
Yep.
commercialized and found its way in the market. That will take some time.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that, David? Any thoughts on that, David? Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I totally can understand that. For example, at one university that I have worked at, they started measuring the number of patents
Hmm.
and patents granted, patents applied for, uh, and this was despite my complaint. Uh, and and soon, now that I have left that university, I continue to read their wonderful, you know, uh, public announcements that they have achieved another breakthrough in the number of patents obtained.
Hmm.
And I can tell you that doesn't really mean very much in reality. So the problem with KPIs is that very smart researchers will very quickly understand how to pick all the low-hanging fruits.
Hmm.
So whatever the KPIs that can get them a higher number, they will focus their energy on those. It doesn't matter if those KPIs would actually lead to real results. And that is the problem. So sometimes it would take a researcher enough um, uh, determination to resist that temptation. Or maybe a very clever researcher can actually satisfy enough of the KPIs, but in reality, they actually allocate their time more specifically on some of the longer term issues that will actually produce results regardless of KPI, such that they know that deep down they have been doing a very conscientious job while satisfying the superficial KPIs at the same time. It is very challenging.
Yep. Okay. So, Daya, anything that you wanna maybe since we have Prof Ida here from IIUM, anything that you wanna bring up or share? Prof Ida, maybe any other aspects of I think Prof Ida, he's an expert of IP in IIUM, David.
I did
So
Mary.
yeah, so
There are
from the
points
go
that
ahead.
I want to add. All right.
Okay.
There were a number of commercialization committees that I attended in IIUM, and some of the researchers you mentioned about the gaps, the soft gaps, by the researchers, right? Some of the researchers when they presented on their finding, say for example on genetic sequencing, they went all out explaining it with all the technical jargon, and at the end, none of us understand what it's all about. How do you help out not only in terms of patent application, but commercializing it if you don't understand what the technology is all about? You can't even understand how it is novel, how it is it
Yeah.
fulfills the industrial application, and what more of inventive step. That's one. Um, so there is also a need to train our researchers on how to pitch their uh, research finding to not later on to business partners, but also to people who are helping them in or making the decision as to whether their patent can be filed or not. That's one. Secondly, although Malaysia has had um, the experience of having institutional IP policies since 1990s. I remember the first few universities had the IP policies in the late 1990s, right? And they've had success in rolling out the number of patents, like David mentioned, right? Patents after patents after patents after patents. But a lot of these patents are actually collecting dust on the shelves because there are actually early findings. And like I mentioned as well, when I asked the researcher on the genetic sequencing, I said, tell me, how is your finding going to be useful? For what product? For which industry? That he cannot answer. Can you imagine, the type of research findings that we produce at the university? These are really early scientific findings, and they may not be connected to any industrial application and whatnot. And there's still a
Yeah.
lot of technical gap among the researchers. Some of them want to file trademark without even having the products. You know, products. What more products which are ready in the market? When they want to file
Yeah.
trademark, they say, and why do you want to file a trademark? Who is going to buy your product? Where are you going to supply the product? They can't answer that. They just thought, oh, I need to protect my right. I need to protect my right. And the simplest way is to file trademark. And the fourth thing is, from all the talks that I've heard from Princeton University, from Cambridge University, with all the dollars and cents that they put on the screen, showcasing the successful commercialization, what they have not shown us are the hidden costs. There's a lot of hidden costs in bringing the product into the market, particularly for pharmaceutical product, because for pharmaceutical product, the kind of clinical, preclinical, post-clinical testing that the product has to undergo, and that costs money. So that cost somehow is not shared when they display the amount of revenue that they make. So it's, oh wow, they make so much revenue, but you don't actually know how long and how much money were actually invested back into the product to package it so that it is ready for the market. That's 4 points that I want to share at the moment.
From your experience, David, I think you shared about the case of the faculty member that had a really good research out of LSE, and you helped him or her figure out the use case.
Right.
Maybe you can share your experience on that, David.
Sure. We can totally understand the frustration of a lot of our colleagues working with academic partners who will present their academic findings in a way that hardly anybody would understand. And this is why we have a lot of different training opportunities that the office established. For example, we have a accelerator program designed specifically for that. And each year we have several academic parties, academic persons joining the accelerator program, specifically training them to engage with the market, to try to validate their market assumptions, and ultimately to prepare their pitch. And they will prepare the pitch and present the pitch, and there is a pitching competition in the end. And I tell you, there is a huge, huge difference between their very first version of their pitch and their final presentation when they actually go to competition. It's like night and day. Usually, their very first pitching practice, all of us sitting there will go like, "Oh no, 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 no! You don't do it like this. You haven't even talked about anything important to the industry people." And they don't understand that. They need to hear the kind of feedback repeatedly from us, from some of our industry consultants, and from industry representatives themselves. And through repeated iteration, they get much, much better. And until their final pitch, they could actually produce a 30-second to 1 minute pitching statement that is clear, that stays on point, that is very focused on the industry problems. And I tell you, practice makes perfect. There's no replacement for the kind of hard work that go into it. And other than that, we also have other online accessible tutorials available to them. And we also just, in general, they don't need to enroll in our accelerator. We're willing to meet with them and really sit down with them to actually see how we can actually help their learning curve to get better at designing the message that actually makes an impact.
And sometimes the researcher tend to use the research title as the title of the projects.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Especially when
Impossible to understand. Yeah,
especially
absolutely.
when they pitch to the investor, where the investor don't want to know about the research, but investor wants to know about its dollar and cents. But so
Yeah.
basically, the most important thing is we need to know who is the audience that we want to pitch to. If the
Yes.
audience is the government side for the government funding, for example, research fund, yes, we can use the research, all the research activities and research term in our presentation. But if our audience is basically the investor, we have to make sure that we need to focus more on dollar and cents.
Yeah.
Because at the end
Yeah.
of the day, the investor don't want to know about the technology, because at the end of the day, they want to know when they can get back their money
Yeah.
or their ROI. So
So we still
that's the most
we're still
important
back
thing.
to we're still back to knowing who you're pitching to, saying the right things, and then conveying the information that they need to know. They don't need to know what they don't need to know, right? And I think at the end of the day, it's about how the researcher needs to strengthen their capability to communicate, and this is where I think what David has shared is very useful, because that means you don't really need to attend workshops and programs to learn about these things. We can actually provide information so that they know they know how to carry themselves when they're pitching to non-technical versus technical. And we've come to the end of the session. Thank you so much, David, for making yourself available at such an early time from Venice. Thank you so much, Prof. Ida from IIUM. We really, really appreciate your input and your questions. I feel like, Daya, we need a separate session with Prof. Ida on this. You think? What do you think? We should look at that. Thank you, Meranti, for for sponsoring this session. We have plans for David, but we shall not reveal it yet. Hopefully, Prof. Ida, we can get some more input from David that you can take away for enhancement of the research commercialization support for IUM. And thank you,
Okay,
everyone.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you for having me.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
David.
Yeah.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye now. Bye-bye.